All right, you lot, don't forget to give us a follow on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And while you're at it, give us a 5-star rating. Trust me, it really does help us out.
The big news obviously this week is a potential breach of the F1 cost cap. One major and one minor breaking from two separate teams. The rumours are that it's Aston Martin and Red Bull, of course, which has been widely documented, that have broken the sort of overall budget. If you don't know, there's like a £150 million budget, or like spending budget, that everyone has to stay within. And yeah, apparently Red Bull have broken it. Now, the repercussions of that could be crazy because obviously they won the Drivers' Championship last season. It's a very difficult topic because Max was not involved, but what does that mean for his championship realistically last year?
It's a very difficult situation, but there do need to be harsh consequences, because this is one thing that the reason it was brought in was to try and get the smaller teams back into the fight, because Mercedes, Ferrari was spending millions, like hundreds of millions, 700 million, and then you've got Williams who can only spend 100 million or something like that. Now, Williams have managed to get that budget higher because there's a cost cap. So they know, okay, we're fine as sponsors, we're trying to get the budget up because we know everybody's on a level playing field. If there is a team that goes, actually, you know what, we're just going to spend a bit more, then that is alternatively cheating, because we've heard it from Toto Wolff. He said that they have got ideas on how to fix this Mercedes car and make it quicker, but they haven't got any money in the cost cap budget to be able to develop those parts, produce them, and get them on the car so that they can be quicker. So therefore, you are gaining an advantage. So for the FIA, if they do come out of it, I hope that if it is true that they do something about it, don't do a Ferrari thing with the engines where they just said, oh yeah, we've had a conversation, but we're not going to disclose any information on that. And then next year they rock up with an engine that doesn't work. Yeah. Or just give a fine, because there'd be the top teams like Ferrari and Mercedes would be like, okay, we've got loads of money in the bank. We can just happily take that hit and then spend more in the season and get that advantage. But obviously the Constructors' Championship points, that's one of them. You can get Constructors' Championship points taken away. You can be disqualified from the whole season as well. And I think it has repercussions for both 2021 and 2022. Obviously the main thing was in 2021, but the progress also carries over. You could have put more money into the testing for like this year's car and the development of this year's car. So yeah, it's definitely something that needs to be looked at. And does the driver get punished as well? Obviously, I'm coming from more of a British bias side. Like, I'm a Lewis Hamilton fan. I support the British drivers. So maybe, my point's going to be more leaning that way. But at the same time, Max is in that position because of a car that potentially has had more money spent on it. So it does need to be looked at. Whether it needs to be penalised or not, that's not my decision, but it does need to be looked into.
I think that's the massive thing as well. It's not just this season. It's kind of... it's not just last season, it's the repercussions that it's then had on this season as well in terms of like development and spending and things like that. What sort of things could they have overspent on that will have,
mate,
will give them an advantage?
Absolutely everything, right? Anything and everything. If they've overspent, listen, the budget cap for last year, 145 million USD, right? If they've spent £1 additional, then that's the rules are rules. You're either within it or you're exceeding it. So they need to get punished. And listen, I took a cheeky screenshot to Hayden's pretty much nailed the punishments that can happen. Minor overspends, deduction of drivers and constructors championship points, suspension from, and again, any, look at me using the bloody, the regulations written by a 5-year-old terminology. Suspension from one or more stages of the competition, limitation on ability to conduct aerodynamic or other testing, reduction of their cost cap. For material, major overspends, the only addition to that list is the exclusion from the championship. And I think Sir Lewis Hamilton fans around the world, that's exactly what they'll be looking for from Max Verstappen. Again, similar to Aiden, I'm not the cost cap arbitration panel or whatever, or adjudication panel. I'm not on there, so I don't know what the answer is, but something needs to be done to set a precedent. And also, again, to expound on Hayden's point, is the fact that there is a durable competitive advantage to be gained from this, right? if you take PEDs as an example in any other sport, if you take performance enhancing drugs today for 6 months and then never take any again, for the rest of your life, you will have an advantage that's a function of that 6 month period, right? And this is exactly what we're dealing with Red Bull. They're going to be able to roll forward this advantage if, again, allegedly, to Niran's point, if they have overspent, they'll be able to roll forward this advantage into next year and the year after that and the years after that. You can't unwind that. And so, in my humble opinion, it needs to be a strong punishment, a really, really strong one, whatever that looks like.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with both your points. You know, I've said before that, you know, the rules are rules, and if you've got the regulations there, they should be adhered to. But there is that discrepancy of in terms of the limitations. I think me and Niran talked about it earlier, where we were discussing the fact that there is, in fact, I'm happy with you actually, there's ambiguity in terms of what the repercussions are of breaking them, because it's such a new regulation. There isn't a clear-cut answer of, if you do this, this is going to be the punishment, and that's the problem, because now everyone's going, well, if they have broken them, what's going to happen? Because last season, if they had, they will have gained an advantage, which would have helped them win the Drivers' Championship, which means the driver has benefited from the design, but he's not at fault for their design. But if he gets reprimanded, is it that, or are they going to get constructors deducted points? It's very
grey.
It's a very grey area.
This is the issue, because it's not like black and white. This is what they did with the extra money as well.
Exactly.
So you can't even necessarily dictate, oh yeah, Max Verstappen only won the championship because of X part that they made with the extra money.
Yeah.
They might not have even spent it on that.
But in that,
It's been on biscuits, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
They might consume a lot of biscuits.
but in that sense, guys, I don't think it matters, right? If it's money spent on anything to do with F1 technological development, then that's a breach.
Yeah.
That's an overspent, even if it was jammy dodgers or whatever. Like it is, and rules are rules,
Yeah.
and they need to be followed. And if they're not followed, then the rules need to, somewhere in the sporting code of conduct or the regs, it needs to say materiality is this. Anything over 10 million.
Yeah.
And if you breach, then this is your... Why is there like 6 different options that I've just read out?
I don't know. And it's not clear as well. But
Frustrating.
one thing that doesn't help is, again, because it's such a new regulation, is there's no historical data to use as a reference point. And, you know, as we've had Ferrari that got the PU limitation for their regulation breach. We've had McLaren who got points deducted. I think disqualified constructors, wasn't they?
Yep.
For their stealing of designs from another team. Then, you know, Jensen Button, Takuma Sato, when they had their issues in 2005, they got points deducted. So there's no reference point for us to be like, oh, okay, they've done this, right? Great, we know this is going to happen, and that is fundamentally the problem. And it's not even just that; it's a common theme in F1 as well.
Don't catch this though. I'll give you another hypothetical. You're right, but why are other sports... Listen, if you score a goal and you're offside...
I know where you're going, and I'm ready for it.
If you score a goal and you're offside, there's no ambiguity. And again, racing is a different beast, right? There's always going to be an element of ambiguity, especially with the policing of it. But why can't we just look in the rule at Chapter 2, Appendix 4 and say, if you spend this much over the budget...
Yeah.
This is your penalty.
I think there's a problem in F1 where there is the entertainment side of it, where you're trying to design the sport to be a spectacle. And then there's the motorsport regulation side of this, and something I said earlier, where sport and competitive sports in nature should be highly regulated and should ignore the spectacle element of it. If that happens, you don't have this issue of ambiguity. You don't, when you create regulations, you have clear-cut regulations with set parameters that if this happens, this is the reprimand. But in F1, we have new regulations that are constantly coming in to try and keep the sport hyped up, and then they have these grey areas because they've oversighted them. And then when these issues happen, for example, Abu Dhabi 2021, you have ambiguity where you have ambiguity in the rules and they're not followed clearly. And it's down into interpretation, which is a massive issue.
Let me just say this finally on this, because I don't want to clog up your agenda.
No, don't worry.
Why this is one of the biggest, richest sports in the world? Yes or no?
Yeah, you need a lot of money to get in.
5 million. The rights a couple of years ago in North America sold for 5 million. Now they're 75 million. The sport is growing. This is one of the greatest sports. This is why we're all here, right? Because we love the sport. So why then are the regulators, the regulations, it feels like they're Eminem in 8 Mile. Freestyling, lads.
Mate,
Why?
I can't argue.
This
I'm
isn't
with you, bro.
commensurate. Like if we're banger racing, cool. We're gonna make some mistake. Freestyle that one because it's banger racing. There is far too much money in this sport now to have these rules that aren't the rules and the implementation of that are not even nearly commensurate to how big the sport has become.
No, I agree with you, mate.
WTF?
I don't know. I don't know. What do you boys reckon?
The prosecution rests. No further questions.
I do agree. In terms of like the way you seem to have these rules almost made up on the fly. I mean, we talked about it with the red flag at Monza and how that situation was such a grey area in terms of sporting spectacle or entertainment spectacle because there just wasn't a clear direction. You know, the FIA are getting to this situation and going, oh yeah, we should have thought about something to deal with this. Well, let's give ourselves 5 minutes and try and work it out. Like you said, there should just be a clear, if you go 1 million over, this is what happens. If you go 5 million over, this is what happens. Again, you will still get that pushing and edging of each team being like, well, we could afford 1 mil, we'll do that, whatever. You know, we could afford to lose 20 points in the championship, maybe, and just, you know, go over by 1 million. That's the problem we're going to have. Again, the reason why we can't have a fining system for this is because they're already willing to spend more money. Yeah. They've just broken the cost cap. That's the whole point. They'll give more money away. That's absolutely fine. They're calm to do that.
And Niran, why would you not? In defence of
Yeah.
Christian Horner, if you have a look at that list, well, they're going to punish me with one of these potentially. I don't know the fine. Why would you not push the envelope? You're almost incentivized to.
It was like last season with the on-track stuff. And in all fairness, it all started, from Lewis crashing with Max. I think the penalty wasn't harsh enough, in all fairness, on Lewis Hamilton because he did take out a competitor.
Silverstone.
Yeah, Silverstone. Yeah. And because of that, Max was like, okay, all right, clearly they're not going to penalise as much. I can push it. And we saw it, race on race. It got pushed further until Saudi Arabia, where we finally had, I might get a penalty a little bit too far.
Yeah, this is
so I won't go
now.
And that is the problem, that they will just keep on pushing that limit as much as they can until they can do it. So, yeah, I mean, for me personally, I do think that both sides should be penalised from it because Red Bull, in all fairness, they didn't care about the constructors last year. All they wanted to do was to break Lewis Hamilton from winning that 8th, and they wanted to get Max Verstappen the championship. Yeah. So they put all their eggs there. If they get 0 points from the constructors last year, they'd be like, so what? We didn't win it anyway. But the one thing that says that maybe Max might keep it is quite fitting. Singapore, 2008, I think it was, Alonso Crashgate. He won the race, but because Alonso didn't know about it, he kept saying, even though the cheating that they did got them the race win. So therefore, it was a cheat win.
Yeah.
So they should have been taken away.